It was Friday afternoon, and 2 hours had passed since they left New York. They still had 1 more hour of driving before they reached their home. They accompanied their only child, Lisa, to her campus. She started studying in college. Nancy turned and looked at her husband, Bill, who was sitting behind the wheel of his Ford Transit. They couldn't take her BMW 230i convertible because they had to move Lisa's belongings. Time flies quickly, she thought. It was on the day she graduated from high school that she took a pregnancy test, and it came back positive. Bill was still at university, studying to become an engineer. Their parents cooperated because they knew each other, and they also knew that their children were in love. She stayed with her parents after the baby was born, and they married after Bill graduated. A homemaker, she saw her husband start out as a junior engineer at a local factory, and then, 10 years later, own his own air conditioning business. Since then, business has flourished. Bill entered into contracts with huge construction companies. He was always a hard-working guy who dedicated his life to his work and his family. "The house will be empty without her," Bill said in a sad voice. "She was closer to you than to me. She was always Daddy's little girl." "She is our princess and should be treated as such," Bill said. "But have you seen her behavior in the last few months?" "She treated me like trash. Whenever you were at home, she was always by your side. Sometimes she laughed at me. When you weren't there, she locked herself in her room, avoiding me." "Come on, Nancy. She's still a child. She was under a lot of pressure during her senior year of high school. She wanted to get the highest grades to fulfill her dream of attending Columbia University. At least try to understand." "I know, Bill, but did you see her reaction every time we were in the same room? Do you remember how 2 months ago I was sitting on the couch and she came up behind me with a knife? I thought she would harm me that day. I saw hatred in her eyes." "It's your imagination, Nancy." Bill was annoyed. Nancy was silent. She did not want to continue the conversation. She didn't want Bill to get angry, at least not now. She took out her mobile phone and sent a text message. "We will be there in 30 minutes. A minute later, her phone beeped. "Is this from Lisa?" Bill asked. "No, this is Betty." "And how does she get along with Paul?" "Last time at our BBQ party, she was ranting about how he works late and she spends too much time and cares about him more than he cares about her. She should know that the sheriff's job is not that easy. She should have thought carefully before marrying him." Nancy remained silent again. She wanted Bill to remain calm until they got home. She just leaned against the window and prayed that they would be home quickly. As Bill pulled into the driveway, he saw the sheriff's car in front of his garage. Bill parked his van behind the car. Paul and his assistant came out and greeted Bill. "What's happening?" Bill asked Paul in confusion. At the same time, Nancy ran back and stood behind Paul's assistant. Bill frowned. "This is the worst part of my job that I hate doing." The sheriff took out a thick paper envelope and handed it to Bill. "William Thompson, you have been served." "Paul, is this a joke?" Bill took the envelope with a trembling hand. He turned to Nancy. She lowered her eyes because she could not look her husband in the face. "Why, Nancy?" "What have I done?" "Bill, it will be better if you leave. Contact a lawyer and take care of your divorce. There is also a restraining order. You are not allowed to come here or be within 500 feet of Nancy," said Paul. "Paul, last Sunday you were here with Betty at Lisa's barbecue party. You both knew what would happen. You came to my house, you ate my food, you even wished Lisa good luck in her studies and her future. You both left with smiles on your faces. This is what I call hypocrisy." "Bill, try to understand." "To understand what Paul said? Why are you an idiot?" Bill yelled. "And you, bitch, stuck a knife in my back?" He turned to Nancy with angry eyes. "If you didn't love or want me anymore, you should have told me. I would divorce you amicably. Bill, the restraining order has already entered into force. I advise you to leave this place." Paul tried to remain calm. Bill walked to his van and tossed the envelope onto the passenger seat, then slammed the door and walked over to Paul. "I need my personal belongings. I hope you are not such an asshole that you will refuse me to enter my house and take some of my personal belongings." He took out the house key and headed to the front door. "Your key won't work." Paul took a set of keys from his pocket and handed it to his assistant. "I see that you took care of everything. Or is it Betty? She was supposed to be here today with the mechanic while we were gone. Am I right?" Paul didn't answer. He simply nodded to his assistant. The latter escorted Bill into the house and remained next to him while he filled 2 suitcases. "Don't worry," Paul told Nancy. "My guys will be patrolling here regularly. If I were you, I wouldn't leave the house for several days. He is extremely angry and can do anything in anger." "I'll stay at home. I'll call a friend to come and spend the weekend at the house," Nancy answered. "Yes, friend," Paul muttered. Bill came out with the suitcases and put them in the back of the van. The assistant handed Nancy a set of keys. Bill took the envelope, took out the divorce document, and began to read it. "Bill, you've packed your things and it's time for you to leave," Paul ordered. "Wait, this bitch wants 50% of my business, 50% of all our savings. She wants a house and her own car, plus monthly child support. This slut is taking me to the cleaners. Bill, if you don't leave, I'll have to arrest you." Paul tried to remove a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "No need, Paul. I'll sign the papers right now and disappear." Bill took a pen and signed wherever it was indicated with small stickers with arrows. "Could you please certify the document and give me my copy?" Nancy, Paul, and his assistant stood in shock. They would never have believed that Bill would accept these terms. Nancy smiled and thought how lucky she was. She got everything she wanted and was free from her husband and daughter. Paul signed the papers as a witness and handed Bill a copy. Bill headed to his van. "Who is he? How long have you been cheating on me with him?" Bill attacked Nancy. "Go inside and lock the door behind you," Paul told Nancy, and headed towards Bill's van. The assistant escorted her inside. "Don't do anything stupid. Think about Lisa." "I already did something stupid when I married that bitch," Bill shouted and started the engine. "She chose to divorce me because she knew that I would never agree to an open marriage. How are you?" "What? What is an open marriage?" asked a stunned Paul. "Don't try to hide it, Paul. Everyone knows this." "What are you talking about?" Paul almost screamed. "Look, Paul, we all know that when you work at night, your brother Tom warms your bed, which of course, completely by chance, is your wife. You're turning me against my brother. Oh shit! Your wife is cheating on you. Considering that you scum betrayed me, I don't apologize for bringing you bad news. Well, I see you're already used to dealing with whores, so even though you're the sheriff, you can't tell when someone is lying. Go home and ask Betty. Then you will know. Bye, cuckold." Bill turned around and left his former property as he was told. Once alone, Nancy poured herself a glass of wine and stood in front of Pagnol's masterpiece, the railway station. The painting was worth 100,000 or more. He left his loss here, she thought with an evil smile. She picked up the phone and pressed the speed dial button. "Come on, Jason, pick up the phone," Nancy shouted into her phone after the connection failed. Then she hung up the phone thoughtfully. "He should have come right here after work," she told herself. She sat down and took a sip of wine. She remembered how they first met. It was a year ago. She was in a department store when they ran into each other. He was in charge of the shoe section. He was in his early 20s and had a perfect body. She melted on the spot. They exchanged phone numbers. The next day she called him and invited him to her home. He came during lunch break and fucked her like a stallion. After he left, she felt like she had been raped. She could barely walk. That evening, she told Bill she wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. After that day, she realized that Bill could never compare to her lover, who was younger and full of energy. And Bill was always busy with his own affairs. At night, he always felt tired. He always helped Lisa with her homework and then stayed up late looking at his files. As soon as he climbed into bed, he immediately fell asleep. Nancy finished her wine and poured herself another glass. She pressed the speed dial button again and received an automated voice message. "The number you are calling is temporarily unavailable. Please try again later." Angrily, she threw the phone on the sofa, grabbed the remote control, and turned on the TV. She couldn't concentrate on the screen. She decided to take a shower. It was a week ago when she was taking a shower with Jason, and he took her to the spot where she was sitting. This was something she had always denied her husband, and Jason made it clear her ass belonged to him and him alone. Last day when she was at his house, and he fucked her half to death. She had a spare key and could visit her lover at any time. Sometimes she would come there when he was at work and clean the entire apartment. She bought him clothes, shoes, cologne, and gave him an expensive watch for his birthday. She gave him a decent amount of pocket money from time to time. Sometimes she let him drive her BMW. "Oh God, I need him now. I'm so fucking horny," Nancy said to herself. She tried to remember the last time she had sex with Bill. She couldn't remember. Has it been 3 months, or 6, or maybe more? She didn't care. She had her young lover, a real man, who could satisfy her. Now they will be together. They do not need to be afraid of anyone. She was free, and he would move in with her that evening. After her shower, she came into the living room, grabbed her cell phone and shouted, "Where are you, Jason? Why don't you pick up the damn phone?" She went to the kitchen and prepared herself a light dinner. "Damn, I can't leave the house. Otherwise, I would go to his house." Then something caught her attention on the TV screen. She rushed into the living room and turned up the volume. She watched in horror as Paul, handcuffed, was led to a police car. Sheriff Paul Anderson first shot his wife in the head, then he drove to his brother's workplace and shot him 5 times. "Both his wife and brother are dead," said the presenter. Nancy turned off the TV and sat down, shocked. "Oh, Betty, I told you to be very careful." She remembered that it was Bill who told Paul about his wife's infidelity, and she began to cry, realizing that it was her actions that led to the death of her best friend and her lover. Although Paul helped her so much in the destruction of her husband, she did not particularly care about his fate. That night she couldn't sleep at all. For the first time, she felt completely alone. She kicked out her husband, her lover could not be contacted, her best friend was killed, her daughter avoided her, her parents had already left this world. Only her sister remained, but she lived with her husband Tom in another city, 300 miles away. Saturday passed and she still couldn't reach Jason. She was alarmed and annoyed at the same time. He could at least leave a message and let me know what's going on, Nancy thought over and over again. On Sunday morning, she decided to go to Jason's apartment. As soon as she walked inside, she felt something was wrong. Photos on the wall and all electronic items were missing. His closet was empty and there was no sign of any of his personal belongings in the bathroom. She threw herself on the bed. "He left! He left me without saying a word!" Nancy exclaimed. "How could he do this to me? It was his idea to divorce Bill so that he could move in with me and we could get married after the divorce was final." She left the apartment and went to a department store that was open on Sundays. There she hoped to find Jason at work. She knew one of his colleagues. She was told that Jason, half an hour after arriving at work on Friday morning, asked to go back to his room because he had forgotten his wallet. He didn't return, and later that day emailed his boss a letter of resignation. Broken, Nancy walked to her car. Why? Why did he do this to me? She thought in confusion. She began to cry. On her way home, she stopped at a gas station and was shocked to discover that her credit and debit cards weren't working. She cursed when she had to pay with all the cash she had in her purse. At home, she drowned her sorrows in alcohol. On Monday morning, she walked into the bank and met with the manager. She was stunned when she learned that her joint account with her husband contained less than $5. "Mrs. Thompson, last Friday, your husband came to the bank and closed your joint credit card. He also reminded us that you are divorcing him and he will no longer be responsible for the mortgage on the house and your car. This is a mistake. My car was paid off in full and the mortgage on my house should have been paid off by now," said an astonished Nancy. "No, the bank issued a loan for your car. We have all the supporting papers, Mrs. Thompson. Your husband also took out a second mortgage on the house to pay for your daughter's schooling and expenses." "But why is there no money in my account?" asked Nancy. Last week, your monthly mortgage payment was debited from your account. There have been no deposits in the last 3 months. Whatever money there was, it was exhausted. What about my husband's business? A monthly transfer from the company account is expected. Unfortunately, Mrs. Thompson, I cannot tell you the details of Mr. Thompson's account. But what I can say is that if your upcoming mortgage payments are not made, your house and your car will be repossessed. But I don't work. I've been a housewife my whole life. I think it would be best for you to discuss these issues with your lawyer. She then checked the safe she shared with her husband. There was only her jewelry. She took them all and put them in her purse. As soon as she left the bank, she called Bill on his cell phone. She received an email voicemail that the number was no longer in service. Puzzled, she called Bill at work. The phone on the other end continued to ring without answer. She swore. Then she quickly dialed Lisa's number. "What do you want, bitch?" Lisa shouted angrily over the phone. "Is this how you talk to your mother, Lisa?" answered the amazed Nancy. "How do you want me to talk to you, slut?" I just want to talk to your father," Nancy muttered. "I can't reach him by phone. Do you know where he is, or how I can contact him?" "I know, but I won't tell you, bitch. The way you callously abandoned him makes you the worst slut on this earth. I don't want anything to do with you. I no longer consider myself your daughter. I don't want you to call me again. I'd better change my number." The phone went off. Shocked, Nancy got into her car, holding the steering wheel. She looked into the distance, and her thoughts were somewhere far away. She tried to figure out where she had gone wrong in her plan and why Jason had left without saying a word. She called her lawyer and managed to get an appointment later that afternoon. Nancy's lawyer told her, "Mrs. Thompson, after your morning phone call, we did some research about your husband's company. Last Thursday, he filed for bankruptcy before you served him. The company will most likely be liquidated. But last time you said that, I could get millions." Nancy almost screamed. "Please calm down, Mrs. Thompson. 2 weeks ago, there were no signs of any financial difficulties. Everything was in your favor. The company's bank account is now frozen. What about a car and a mortgage on a house? Last week, he used your house as collateral for a loan, again before filing divorce papers. For a car, when you signed the title, you also signed the loan in your name. All this cannot be true." Nancy began to cry. "Mrs. Thompson, I have a personal question for you. Do you think your husband knew he was going to be served?" "No," Nancy answered, looking very thoughtful. "He never saw this coming." She took a deep breath. "So, as far as I'm concerned, I won't get a penny from my husband's company. I have no money in the bank, and my car and house will be repossessed." "I'm afraid so, yes. Is there any way to get him to at least pay the mortgage? The company was his only income. Without this, he is ruined. Once he starts working, we can force him to pay you child support. We had several investment certificates that I could not find in our safe deposit box. We can find out when he cashed these certificates and also conduct a thorough investigation into his company. And we will have to look for your husband. We don't know where he is. His legal advisor handles everything. Please find him. One question, Mrs. Thompson. All this will require additional expenses. How will you pay the bill?" Nancy had never thought about all these expenses, and then suddenly she smiled. "I have a painting that costs a lot of money." "Fine. Take the money and write us a check so we can get to work." "No problem. I'll call you soon." "And one last thing, Mrs. Thompson. I think you should prepare to vacate your home. I advise you to start looking for a place to stay for the night." At home, she sat in front of a painting by Pagnol. "I sincerely wanted to leave you, but because of this asshole husband, we will have to separate." She turned to the painting. She then took out her cell phone and called her sister. "Hey, sis, I want to ask you for a favor. You know, Nancy, I never refused you anything. Bill and I are getting a divorce." "What? Is this some kind of joke?" "No, sister, it's difficult. I will need a place to stay temporarily. I was wondering if you would be so kind as to let me stay in your guest room. I'll explain everything when we meet." "What about Lisa? How did she take it? You know that she is her father's daughter. I'm the bad guy here. Is there any way you both can work this out? For example, go to a consultant. I don't think so. I'm really sorry. There's no problem with me. I don't think Tom will say no, and our daughter will be happy for you to stay with us for a while. Thank you, sister. I'll let you know when I arrive.